Welcome back, my beautiful audience, to another episode of the BambooSZN podcast. I'm your host, sober wellness coach Dorian Wormsley. This podcast is sponsored by Dorian Wormsley Wellness, a coaching business created to help you build a strong body and clear mind through sobriety and fitness. With that being said, coming up April 27th, Sunday here in Las Vegas, Strong Body, Clear Mind Healing and Wellness Workshop. That'll be also virtual. This workshop is meant to help you feel like you're not alone on your journey of healing. We're going to have some movement, breathing techniques. I'm partnered up with my girl, Gabby, who is an expert when it comes to trauma and how it's held in the body. Do not be scared. Do not shy away. We're in this with you to help you become your best self. Now, my guest today is an Emmy nominated actor, writer, and impressionist. He is a phenomenal MC, host, and speaker. I bring you the infamous, the amazing John Di Domenico.
Hello, Dorian. How are you?
Oh man, I'm so excited to have you on today.
Oh, it's great to be on. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
With everything you're doing, I'm glad you were able to even make the time and said
Yeah.
yes. I was very excited once you said yes, and quickly we turned it around to get you on.
Well, I have to say, because of your story and seeing you at the NSA event, I was like, I got to be on this guy's show. So it meant a lot to me for me to be here, and even you asking me. So
Thank you so much, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So we did meet at the NSA, the National Speaker Association's
Las Vegas chapter.
Las Vegas chapter. We had our last story standing competition. I was one of the speakers and you were the MC.
Right.
And then just watching you, man, I've been an MC once and it was challenging, and watching you do it, oh man, it's I'm sure you've done it for a long time or what, but the way you held our attention, kept us engaged, because there's a lot of downtime.
A lot of downtime. You got to have a lot in your quiver and your holster and everything else, and just be ready to whip it out. Because when someone goes like this, you're like, more? Okay. So you just got to be, you got to love to be in front of people, and you got to love to be prepared.
Yeah, you were very prepared because some of the moments were longer, some were shorter.
Yeah.
And you were able to keep our attention, at least speak for myself, keep our attention.
No, you can speak for everyone.
But but not overwhelm us and just get like long-winded.
Yeah.
It was information. It was entertainment. It was storytelling. I was like, wow, this guy's.
I tried to cover in front of that group specifically, but when I was preparing for that, like I do any of my corporate jobs or anything else or stand up, I said to myself, we're not getting paid to do it. It's for the love of speaking and being with your peers in this field. And I thought, I am preparing for this like I'm preparing for a week-long corporate job. And I had as much material ready, and I mapped the whole thing out. And even with that, I didn't realize when we came back I had to do 15 more minutes. After I'd done 30 minutes, then we had the gaps between each speaker. So it was, a big thing of what we do and anyone does who can be successful at it is being prepared as much as possible. Over prepare.
You make a good point, because I didn't know either. I mean, I'm just speaking, but them throwing the last minute, hey, you got a 5-minute gap after each speaker.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been a surprise to you,
That
right?
was a shocker. That was a shocker.
But you did it.
And the thing is, I always try to take it from my own perspective in the sense that we're seeing these speakers, and not everybody knows who everybody is. But for me, it's like, it could be, so what do you like to do on the weekends? But I want to know, first I want to know, like, how'd you get into this? I want to know, how did you choose this topic? I want to know the things that I want to know. And usually, most times, that aligns with the audience. And that's why I did kind of more of an interview.
Yeah.
As opposed to it. I had read, obviously, their bios and did their introduction. So let me drill down on this, and let me drill down on that. And I want to give value to the audience and contextualize who each speaker is. I even tried to do that with the judges, because when you see judges out of the film, like, why is this person judging? But I didn't want to just read the bios again.
Yeah.
I wanted them to say it. One of the greatest things I've ever learned from a good friend of mine who's like he calls himself a comic genius, Joey Perillo, but he's back in Philadelphia. But the thing is, he always said to me, make the audience do the work. Make the audience do the work. And I always thought that, let them do the work. You know what I mean? Because if you can get an audience really with you and interacting with you and participating with you, they remember that a lot more.
Wow.
The impact goes way up when you're not just talking to an audience, that you're really interacting with them. That makes a difference. Then it becomes this group experience as opposed to me or you just talking.
And I think those are some of the worst situations you could be in, a workshop or an event, or you're just sitting there just being talked to.
Right, being talked to.
Well, speaking of getting to know us on the speakers that were there, we got a little bit to know a little bit about you, and you were sharing a couple things of how you got into where you're at now, and it intrigued me. I'm like, wow, I would love to hear more, and that's why I wanted to invite you on, outside of just the talent you displayed that day. So how did you get into the speaking space? Because you're not only just a speaker, but you, like you said, MC, impressionist. How did you get into that speaking space?
Well, we all have these different arcs of how we get anywhere. But, as I said that day, I was 5 years old. I was a big ham. I grew up in a row home neighborhood outside of Philadelphia, and, hundreds and hundreds of row homes. And the neighbors used to sit out, and they were like an instant audience. And I would watch Ed Sullivan, and I would watch comedians. I loved comedians. I had a kind of a rough childhood. So anything that made me laugh kind of elevated me. And then when I started seeing impressionists, specifically, I remember seeing John Biner. Ed Sullivan introduced John Biner, and then John Biner did Ed Sullivan. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, he's speaking in that person's voice. How's that possible? And as soon as I saw that, I tried it, and I was able to do it. And I went out to my neighbors, and I was like, now, right here on our show, the fabulous Garbazzo brothers and group Girl Scout Troop 625, girls, stand up and show us your cookies. And they laughed their heads off. And to me, that was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever, to be a 5-year-old and to have adults laughing, at this precocious kid and saying all this stuff. And my parents were really amazed because I had a severe speech impediment.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And when I got into first grade, I was diagnosed. And then for the next 8 years, I did speech therapy 2 times a week.
Oh, wow.
And they everything in my mouth is very large, like my tongue, my adenoids, the sides, everything. And basically I sounded like Elmer Fudd when I spoke. So the speech therapists taught me how to work on throat placement, nasal placement, actual vocal production, where we're supposed to be speaking. Because when we speak through the nasal mask, we should be right about here when we're producing sound.
Wow.
Right here. And then the big thing for me was tongue placement, because that was literally getting in the way. So as they were teaching me all these things and fixing my speech, I'm taking each piece and thinking, well, wait a minute. If I can do this with my throat and do this with my nasality and do this with my vocal production, I can produce this voice and this voice. So I remember watching Columbo as a kid, because I'm going back obviously years, but I remember thinking, listen to Peter Falk. And I always think, if I can do this, then I can make the Peter Falks. Folks, I hate to bother you. And then as I got a little older, I would be all these different other impressions. And my life was, I want to be a comedian. I want to be an impressionist. I want to be a comedic actor. That's going to be my career path. And I went to, was doing it in high school and in college. And then I graduated. I was a copywriter at an ad agency in the hopes of going to New York to do all this stuff. And then I started doing stand-up and traveling around the Northeast, and I hated it. It was really lonely. It kind of sucked. Not the performance part. That was great, but it was like my entire day boiled down to 30 minutes. I was kind of a featured, I was a featured comedian. Every now and then I would headline, and I didn't really like it. So now it's around 96, had to be 96. And somebody saw me in New York at a comedy club. They said, "Can you come in my office on Monday? I might want to book you for something. We just want to have a meeting." So I went to this guy, Mario Giampaglia, who I know to this day, who was like a personal friend, because he's been such an incredible guide and help. And they said, "We want you to do a character at a national sales meeting." And I said, "What's a national sales meeting?" And he said, "Well, every company has a meeting, and this is for Sony." And I was like, oh, I know who Sony is.
Yeah.
And they said, "We just want you to do one element over this 3-day meeting, to host this game show." And I I flew down to Florida, first class.
Oh,
I've been driving like 500 miles to do comedy, and landed. The guy had my name for the very first time, John Di Domenico, spelled right. And he said to me, "Hey, I'm gonna ride you back to the hotel." He says, "We didn't have a town car. Do you mind it's a limo?" And I'm like, "Mind it's a limo? Are you kidding me?" Then we go to the hotel. We go to the Swan at Disney. It's beautiful.
wow.
And then I go down and do a rehearsal, and everybody on the team is amazing. And that night I went back to my room and I took a yellow pad, legal pad, which I would write my comedy on, but I put a line down the middle and put every company I could think of in every major city. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to do these meetings with great teams in an incredible venue with an engaged audience. Because the next day I did the job and it was incredible. Wow. It was like 1,000 people or more. And then I learned about the whole 3-day meeting and other speakers with, all these speakers and panelists, and a comedian came in, Brian Regan. And I just was like, and then I shifted and I started doing that. And as I was doing those meetings and hosting now from beginning to end, those 3 days, I'd see the keynote speaker. And I was kind of like, well, I could do that. I could talk on something. I could be that guy up there. And over the years, I started just thinking, you know what? Time's going on. I think it's now the time to make that switch. So the last few years, I've been working on my keynote, but doing corporate meetings since 1996.
Wow, almost 30 years.
Yeah, and it's been great. It's the best move I've ever made. And, very luckily, since I do a lot of different impressions, I've ended up on 5 years on Conan O'Brien, 3 years on Howard Stern, appearances on Kimmel,
wow,
all these different things. And so it was funny. I moved away from it and I ended up being pulled back in. And it's, I think it's when you do what you love, eventually people find you,
I love that.
Yeah. So that's been my story. And then it wasn't until I think 3 years ago, I seriously joined NSA. I'd done NSA events before, and I'm somewhat of a dabbler, which I've learned is not a good thing. Like, make a commitment. It's something I've learned through NSA and through speaking, and every speaker I've ever seen, like, make a commitment. Don't dabble. People don't like dabblers. You know what I mean? Because then you're not fully in. Mm-hmm. There's a back door. I got a trap door here. I got a back door here. And, it's something I've made a point to move away from,
Earlier, you mentioned a rough childhood. What was rough about your childhood? What happened? What was going on?
It was a very, my parents fought all the time. We always had the police at the house. And, it's funny because, it was a row home neighborhood. It's kind of a pressure cooker situation. My dad was a World War II veteran.
Oh, wow.
He was 40 plus when I was born.
Okay.
So, this was his second family, and it was a blended family because of my mother's 2 children from her first marriage. And that was kind of a shitty situation. And they didn't like each other. My parents did not like each other. And that's why the police were always there, and they really could not stand each other. And it was, growing up in a situation like that, in a neighborhood like that, and all I thought about was, I want to get the hell out of here. I really want to get out of here, and I was, would watch TV as a kid and go, there is a better place. There is a much better place. There's a place with loving parents. Not that they didn't love me, but my dad was kind of, emotionally absent guy, typical World War II veteran in that sense. My mom had her own issues, but I could see there are different situations, and you just have to work towards those things, and otherwise you're just stuck.
Yeah,
you are stuck, and I didn't want to be stuck. I knew I was smart. I'm not I'm not a genius, but I knew I was smart enough to get out of where I came from and get out of these circumstances and make some changes so I could kind of enjoy what the world has to offer. Starting with healthier relationships and better income. Of course, I'm pursuing comedy. What was I thinking? But there's a world out there that you can go after. There's no reason that you can't have what you want. You know what I mean? We live in a time where literally anything is possible. Any career is possible. Any way, you get 7-year-olds that are the highest paid people on YouTube, and this whole thing has been coming for quite a while. So for me, I knew, and I say this when I speak, it's a moral imperative that you meet your full potential. And even though I had a severe speech impediment and I have ADHD and dyslexia, I want to meet my full potential. I may not meet it until like I'm 85, but I am a lifelong learner and I will constantly keep moving forward, because that is the only way you can experience, in my opinion, that you can experience this life to the fullest, is for you to go after your full potential.
What do you think? As you say that, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But with everything you had against you, speech impediment, dyslexia, ADHD, the parents, not an unstable environment, but, emotionally it's all over the place. But for whatever reason, you chose comedy to get you out.
Yeah.
Where do you think the mindset came from what you just said? Do you get what I'm saying? Because there's people who are in your shoes and they're
the opposite,
stuck, right?
Yeah. No, I grew up with guys who OD'd. Gagged on their own vomit from alcohol. Wow. You know what I mean? I think it's part of it is, since this is about sobriety, and obviously the before sobriety, there is an addiction of some kind, that it is so easy to fall into an addiction for so many reasons. So many reasons, being lazy or just numbing the pain or all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned to you, my brother George drank himself to death.
Wow. How old was he?
He was, he died in 2017. He was 9 years older than me. Oh. So, and he was the star of the family. He was from my mother's first marriage.
Okay.
And he got every break. Obviously, his father leaving them, my brother George and my sister Carol, was very heartbreaking to him. He never talked about it, but I kind of put this together. And he went to LaSalle University, good student, got a great job out of college. And I remember he worked for a very well-known automotive company, and he was the fleet manager for Long Island, New York. And I would go visit him during Christmas and spring break because I was in college at the time. And I'll never forget this. He was having a holiday party for all the fleet managers on Long Island that his company serviced. And he got smashed. And I remember thinking, I was 18 at the time, or 19. I was thinking, I may not know a lot, but I know enough that at your own party, when you're the host, don't get falling down drunk.
Yeah.
And one of the fleet managers who I'd met earlier in the day put his arm around me and said, your brother needs help. And it was like the beginning of it. He'd gotten out of college, got a great job, was right about here. And then like the next, till he drank himself to death, it was just a downward slide. The jobs got less prestigious, less money. He lost his wife. He lost his second wife. It was just this slide all the way down. And in retrospect, I realized it's just slow suicide. It's slow suicide. And eventually he was living in the term is like from the 40s, but he was literally living in a flop house with a bunch of other guys his age who had become alcoholics. And the guy who owned it had been in recovery, and he was helping these guys out. But he literally bumped his head because he's on the highest floor and had a sling, bumped his head, fell, and wasn't discovered for like 3 days, and he died. And we were all upset, but at the same time, it was like, when they say he's in a better place, we were thinking he's in a better place. He just could not, he was too smart for AA. I remember he said to me, because I'm very aware of the 12 steps and all the programs. Yeah. And I remember saying to him, because he was lying to us, saying he had a sponsor and this and that. So what's your sponsor's name? He couldn't even make up a name. I said, what step are you on? Oh, I just haven't gotten to the steps yet. And he just wouldn't do it. He just didn't want to be better. But he also didn't want to admit to the fact that he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
That everybody else, everything else, it wasn't his fault. And when you see this happen, it's so heartbreaking. But when the person is unwilling, at the very least, to say, I'm an alcoholic and I need help, and instead the person is just fighting themselves, it's so brutal to watch, And we live in a time, at this moment, right now, if you're addicted to heroin, alcohol, shoplifting, pornography, whatever it is, you can go online. And if going online isn't safe, there's a phone number, there's a meeting, there's people who want to help you, brothers and sisters in this same addiction who have come together to help each other out. There's also professionals that are willing to help you for free. And then obviously there's people who are willing to, you pay to help. But with all of that, he wouldn't do the least bit to recover. And it was just so, and I say this only because your question goes back to why for me to do this. I don't know, other than I knew there was a much better life to get out of where I grew up, to get out of the situation, and to, even to see my brother and my mother had serious depression, to not get away from them and run away from them, but to, in my own way, find where I can succeed, where I can grow, where I can meet my full potential. And now, as a speaker, hopefully help other people to maximize who they are. I'm a chronic procrastinator, so I talk on everything from, the ADHD, procrastination, habits. Yeah. I'm a big Atomic Habits guy and Tiny Habits and all of these different books, because the time in our day is so valuable. It's the one thing. Time is the one thing. You can't make more of it. You can't buy more of it. And I just always go back to my brother. He was a great guy. He was a very funny, very loving guy, but in deep inside, he hated himself enough to kill himself. His daughter said to him at one point, he was like, "Dad, if you can get sober for a week, I'll let you see your grandson." And he couldn't do it. That wasn't long after that he passed away. So
I like, man, that's deep.
Yeah, I hit you with a lot of stuff.
No, it's good, because that's why I have this podcast. It's not just for entertainment, and I want people to hear these real life stories of real life people, because they could go to your Instagram and see you like, oh my God, he's funny. But they don't understand the struggle that you had to go through and things you had to overcome, and see, like, to see your sibling slowly take themselves away, and there's nothing you can do, even if you tried to help.
Right.
There's somebody out there who is literally in that same situation.
Right now.
Needs to hear it from somebody like you to be like, damn, shit, I feel seen now. And so I do appreciate you for opening up and sharing that. And even at the speech competition, like, in my head, when I did it, it was great to win things, right? But in my head, I was like, for me, this is my opportunity. When I joined NSA back in November, my main thing is I'm more of a hands-on learner.
Yeah.
I want to talk in front of the best speakers. I want them to pull me to shreds with their feedback. I don't want to be, you did good at this. No, tell me what I did wrong and what I need to do to be the best, because that's just how I feel. And that was finally the moment. So when the thing came up to sign up, I was like, okay, cool. Now I can do a story. I don't care how it comes out. I want it to become decent, but I want to hear the feedback. Mm-hmm. And after I finished the last word of it, and I just felt the energy in the room.
You had people in rapt attention.
It was just like, just still. And I'm like, oh shit. And then having you come up and tell me like, hey, very powerful. My brother passed away from drinking himself to death. And I had another speaker come up to me saying, like, 3 or 4 people came up to me and told me what they liked about it, how it touched them in different ways. Before I even knowing who won, right there in that moment, I was like, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
That's what I needed to not only just confidence, but to know my message is needed and it's going to touch the right people how it should at the right moment. So that was beautiful for me. And back to, you saying you shifted from straight comedy impression to now kind of taking more serious your speaking. Have you found it hard to kind of let that go, or do you feel at all any times like that tag is stuck on you? Does that make sense?
The tag is really stuck
people
on
not
me.
want to take you serious, but kind of like, you're an impressionist. Why would we want to listen to your keynote? That makes sense?
Right. Oh, no, 100%. And, it's so funny because I've worked for many, many years, and because I started doing Trump back in 2004,
Yours are good.
and then when he announced in 2015, I was just in the right place. There was nobody doing him. I was organically number one on Google, and also because with my acting training, I had full makeup and wardrobe and the whole bit. So I got picked up by Conan. Like I said, I was on Conan for 5 years. Over COVID, I got picked up by Howard Stern and all of these amazing. So I got like all this news coverage, New York Times, Washington Post, all this great stuff. But it kills me when I'm at an event and someone who's in the industry introduced me and goes, "This is John Di Domenico. He's the greatest Trump impersonator ever." And all of a sudden, like, you're reduced down to this one thing. And it's like, I'm more than an impressionist. I'm more than an impersonator. And that's the part that, and I know that's an ego thing too.
Oh.
I know that's part of my ego that I have to, but I'm so much more. But I am. So it's always that balance of how much of this is ego and how much of this is a real thing where I'd like you to know more about me as opposed to this one thing. Because as humans, we always distill everybody down to that one thing.
That one label.
Yeah, one label. Here's my friend Bart. He used to be an NFL quarterback. Yeah, 25 years ago. So but in that meantime, he's done a lot of other things. So for me, it's obviously getting beyond that. I do have a story to tell, and I do want to help people. And I'm very lucky to be able to make people laugh. At the same time, one of the things I tried not to do was the impressions at the thing, but in a way, 'cause I love pleasing audiences, they wanted to hear the voices. So I have to come to like a happy medium.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, baby. Because people just love hearing all the different voices. And so if in a keynote, and you've probably seen enough keynotes where somebody's very, very funny, and you're like, oh my God, this guy's really funny. And then they get into the serious stuff. Mm-hmm. So now my goal is in my keynote is take people on a ride, which every keynote does. It's going to take you to those laughs. It's going to take you to those serious places. It's going to take you to, when the ride ends, so to speak, that you've learned something and you pick something up. I think one of the reasons, I know one of the reasons that you were so effective was a lot of the other speakers were telling stories and they were great, but you kind of just like, I'm going to take my mask off and I'm going to stand here authentically and tell you my story. And it was like, so, you really bared yourself. And some of the other speakers did too, but you did it like from end to end. And it was so beautiful. And that's why I think your audience reaction was totally different, because it was different. And it was 5 minutes. But what you packed into that 5 minutes was so incredible. And I think people really relate to real honesty, because everyone did a great job, but the stories are stories. And when you can tell when someone has to embellish it to kind of like make things connect, you needed no embellishment. It was extremely moving. Everyone connected to it. Everyone has a mom. Everyone has those situations where they have something where I've got to get beyond this. I've got to move beyond. If not for myself, for my mother, for my wife, for my kids, and I think that's what cemented it. And as you spoke, it just went right to my brother. And my issues too. Wow. I think none of us are devoid of an addiction in some form. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think you're such an effective speaker. I can't wait to watch you do a full keynote.
Shit, me either. I can't wait to watch it back and just
Because you can only get better doing it.
Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah.
Just more repetitions, get better at it, obviously extend it. But back to you, thank you for that. I appreciate the compliment. 'Cause to me, like I said, you've been in the game a long time. You've seen a lot of speakers. You've heard, you've spoke yourself. So that's the feedback I loved, and I'm glad I got to get from other professional speakers. Like one of my first times telling it in that way, and it's in front of 30 professional speakers. Like, that's where I want to say it's where you want to be.
Yeah, that's when they told me I was going to MC, I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
These are the people. You know, these are the people who see other MCs, who see other keynotes, who see other speakers all the time. This is all they do.
It's your time to shine.
Yeah.
That's how I saw it, as my time to shine. Like, whether I'm ready or not, this story's got to come out how it comes. And then the feedback was just beautiful from people. And the other people had great stories also. And back to what you, to it real quick, I was talking about this, I shared on my Instagram, but as I'm sitting there, I'm number 4 out of 8. The first 3 go. And I'm trying not to be too over competitive. I'm like sitting there, I'm listening to listen. I try to talk to myself to listen to the story, not to worry if they're good or anything like that. So I'm listening. The first 3 people go. And as you mentioned earlier, some people have some jokes in between or anything like that. I'm watching. And as they're performing, there was moments, each speaker, the first 3, where they had people laughing and everybody's like, oh, like, good little moments. So I'm nervous. I'm like thinking about my story. I'm like, I have nothing like that in my story. Nothing's funny about it.
No comedy.
Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, okay, is there a way I can maybe throw in a little? And I'm like, nah, just do it. Just do it how it is. Then I did it, felt the reaction. Then the next 4 people went, same thing. They all had a little bit of some kind of funny or comedy within it. So then I'm thinking like, damn, I should have put something funny. But then I had to just talk to myself and realize my story is going to hit who it's supposed to touch.
Yeah.
And then getting the feedback and other speakers come up to me after the fact saying how it touched them, how great it was. I'm like, all right, cool. I don't need to have anything funny. Maybe down the line, if it's a longer.
When it organically comes.
It can flow into that. But I didn't. Yeah, so it's just important, I think, to remember your purpose, your reasoning behind your story, why and who you're trying to touch. That's why I love people like David Goggins.
Yeah.
When he tells his story and talks about it, and a big thing about one of the things I heard him say is about when he's cussing and stuff, and people are like, man, can't be cussing like. And he's like, look, I can't just. What I went through was hard and ugly and wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
The cussing that I do is my expression to understand how serious and deep it was. And him and similar to another speaker, Eric Thomas, those are the people who I aspire to be like when it comes to telling your story and your rawness.
Yeah, that his story is so incredible and so raw. But it's funny, when I read his book and that stuff about his childhood and how I could relate. My dad wasn't as successful as his dad, but like that living in fear, not knowing what mood your father's going to be in when he comes home. Like, I had PTSD reading his book, especially those childhood years.
Wow.
Once he got beyond the military, I could relate to it. But it's such an incredible story. And one of the takeaways I got from his story was that I read the research on this. What he's done is amazing. He's like next level 10 by a factor of 10. But a lot of us, when we're in those situations, physical or mental, and we think we're done, like, I can't do it. This is it. I'm done. Like, we have 40% more left in the tank. 40%. And he has proven it. He has pushed through to a level that most of us will never even get to. But one of the things in life, and one of the things I took away from his book was, we love our comfort in this country. We love our comfort. We love our ease of accessibility. We love the fact that we get our favorite snacks at 29 different places, CVS, this place, that place, whatever. But his thing about just being uncomfortable because in those moments of being uncomfortable, that's where the growth starts, and that's how you can get to the next level and push through. And it may be something where it saves your life. I was so honored. I got to introduce Marcus Terrell. I think I'm going to say his name wrong, but he was the one who wrote Lone Survivor.
Oh, okay.
And the one Mark Wahlberg did it. And I introduced him recently at a national sales meeting. And he's with his SEAL team, 6 guys, and they go in. I think there are 4 of them. They get spotted. They're all shot dead. He lives, and he's shot multiple times, literally crawls, gets discovered by an Afghan village. They hide him. They send a rescue team. All those guys die in that. And then he finally gets rescued. And it's an incredible story. And I'm not doing it justice. But the fact of the matter was, and when I spoke with him on stage, and I have to do the question and answer, lead the question and answer, my thing was where does this come from? Where does this so many people just would have given up.
Yeah.
You're dragging yourself through an area you don't know where you are. The Taliban is chasing you. They're going to kill you when they get you. These people in the village took him in, which is truly incredible. Where do you just mentally, I give up. I'm just going to lay here and wait till them. Just fucking kill me.
Yeah.
Just please end this. And I know in my life, I've been at those places, where you're just I've been divorced twice. I've lost everything twice, close to $1 million I've lost. And you're just just please end this, And those are the darkest times. Those are the dark nights of the soul, You lose a family member, you lose money, you lose a close friend, you lose all those things. And the thing is, you just have to say to yourself, get through tonight and see the daylight. One of the things I say is, and I'd gotten this from another speaker, he said, stop listening to yourself. Stop listening to the automatic negative thoughts and start talking to yourself. And you kind of said that before you went on. You talked to yourself. Stay the course. Don't add a joke.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going to do. As opposed to, and I heard a little bit of you listening to yourself, the doubt, but it's those really dark times when the listening is counterproductive and the talking is the productive part. I can do this. Other people have done this. I've gotten through this before. This is not the end. This is just a new beginning. It's not the beginning I wanted, but it's the beginning I have. And that's what I've learned. And that's why, being a comedian and impressionist, that message doesn't jive with that. I'm not saying that in a comedy club, but I can say that on a stage where people are primed to listen for something like that and to have a message that'll hopefully lift people up. One of the things is, I think in our world and our society is everyone's hey, everything's great, everything's fine. But let's face it, all of us, we can go to a meeting right now, there's going to be 1,000 people. Pretty much 99.9% of that people in that audience, those attendees at a meeting, have had serious shit, thoughts of ending it all, thoughts of jumping out a window. My joke is, it's from another comedian, but I've always thought it was the funniest thing where he says, sometimes I look at my wife and I think I want to spend the rest of my life with her. And other times I look at her and think, how can I fake my death? You know what I mean? Sometimes we just, you just don't know what to do, and you've got to push through, and life is crappy. There's stretches that are absolutely incredible and wonderful, but so many things can detract, real things, and we all I've never had any issues, but everybody's had issues. And I'm not saying like put them on your sleeve and wear them, but there's this thing where we're all in agreement, like we're all going to agree everything's fine. And I was like, not necessarily. And that's why I think in this country, it's the only country I can speak to, is that people are so against kind of like dealing with mental health issues and sobriety and recovery and all those things are part of that. You know, I think it needs to be more upfront. It's okay to watch the Super Bowl and watch 27 commercials on people drinking alcohol. But if there was a commercial about getting sober, people are like, gee, this is really uncomfortable. That's really, I don't know if I want to, geez. You know, we can take the boozing it up really easy, you know, or the whatever drug you're given to get through the day. But to talk about the stuff, the healing stuff and the hard stuff, you know, to write in a journal, to do the 12 steps, to go into recovery, to whatever it is, to have to move from a place where I can't be here. I can't be with this group of friends. I'm going to end up drinking. I'm going to end up drugging really fast, and to move someplace else and to take yourself out and to be lonely and to have to deal with that loneliness because you're starting over again, you know, and that's an extreme thing, but you know,
this goes, all what you just said is fire. And I agree 100%. When you think about it, all of that, the drinking, not wanting to face your stuff, it goes back to what you said earlier. When we were referring to David Goggins, is people love comfort because it's very uncomfortable to be out with friends and be the one not drinking. Very uncomfortable to take accountability. It's very uncomfortable to call yourself out for your own suffering. And that's what the porn, the food, the women, the men, entertainment is what you're using it for.
Yeah.
To escape those moments. Because I only speak for myself. When I was by myself and going sober and didn't use entertainment, didn't use nothing, and I sat, would be in bed and not do nothing, it was uncomfortable. It was it was like crack. I never done crack, just for record, but it felt like crack to where I was like, I need to touch my phone. I need to see something. And I would just sit there and I was like, nah, man, we gotta, talking to myself, gotta stay the course.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. In the moment, I didn't know I was pushing myself towards uncomfortability and growth. When I look back on it now, I'm like, I'm glad I did. But that's what a lot of it is when people choose not to do the hard stuff. Like you said, it's hard to go have a conversation with your mom about something that you've been holding for a long time. Because maybe you don't know how to have the conversation. You're scared how she's going to react. It's uncomfortable to tell your friends, hey, I can't hang out with y'all anymore.
Right.
I'm trying to do something different. It's hard because now you're alone.
And they're the only people you know.
Nobody wants to feel alone. Because when I was going through my stuff, it was lonely and stuff. Cause I'm at that point in time, I didn't know many people who were sober or doing sober activities. Every activity included some type of alcohol or something.
Everything. It's really amazing.
Everything. Even I used to go hike. I used to crack a Celsius, take it with me, go hiking, you know, and simple things like that. And that's what it is. It's just the unwillingness to be uncomfortable. And we all know the saying. We see the quotes. We follow people on Instagram. You're going to hear it here. Uncomfortable where growth is. We know that. It's not.
Yeah.
But for some reason, people aren't doing it. And something I heard, a quote I read today, I believe. There's a gentleman I follow. He drops real good quotes. He said, stop trying to not feel good all the time. Allow yourself to feel and go through it. And that's what's happening. People start to feel a certain way they're not used to. They're feeling uncomfortable. They're feeling weird. They're feeling shy, anxious. They go and find something to get rid of that feeling. It could be alcohol. It could be entertainment. But just allow yourself to feel that. Feel anxious. Feel mad. Feel sad. Feel it and try to understand it. You don't have to feel good all the time. I don't think you're supposed to feel good all the time.
Right. And I agree with that. And, you know, you going back to what you said without trying to pick up the phone, it is really tough to just be with yourself. Just be with yourself. And I'm not talking about an 8-minute meditation. I'm talking like for an entire evening. I mean, most people do not do that. Either the TV's on, not only that, the TV's on, they're on their phone, They have an eye, you know what I mean? Something, they're drinking this like constant stimulation in some form to keep this division from yourself. And like the greatest thing you can do is just be with yourself. And one of the things I've been working on in my keynote, because I'm not sure how to present it, but I know there's something there, is would you go out for coffee with yourself? If you had to work with yourself, would you look forward to going into work? If if somebody said, hey, Darian, I'm so glad you're here with me at coffee. I am going to introduce you to somebody that I know, and they're really amazing. And you walk in and you look at yourself like, I got to spend an hour with myself.
Woo!
You know what I mean? Are you a person who elevates people? Are you a person who welcomes people? Are you a person who people want to be with? Do you want to be with yourself? Do you want to spend time with yourself? And this is something I think about all the time, because if you are, then that goes out to the world. If you're not, people don't want to be with you. People don't want to work with you. They don't want to create with you. They don't want to, nothing. So if you can be that person to yourself, that you are at a starting point for your life to really change and to grow. But if you have to constantly keep yourself stimulated so you don't know yourself, then you're never going to grow. And we see this all the time. There's people in life and they'll get through and they'll die and that was it. But going back to what I said is, for me, it's a moral imperative to reach my full potential. Period. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you at the event when you were emceeing and doing your impressions, because you're one of the best Trump impersonators there is.
Impersonators. I like that.
Is it impersonator?
No. Well, yeah, the impersonator's the full makeup and the wig and the whole thing, the whole presentation. And then impressionists just kind of do like little bits,
Has there ever been situations, or do you ever read the room or anything like that? Because we all know everybody doesn't love him, right?
Right.
He has people who hate him, people who definitely love him. I'm not political, but I do see comedy when I do see people like you impersonating him, and it's just so good and funny. Have you ever have to like make sure you read the room? Does it not bother you, or do you do it regardless?
I do it. I'm hired to do a job if it's at a public event or something. But if I'm doing Guy Fieri, baby, you know what I mean? Love piece of taco grease, man. Like everyone loves him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everyone loves Austin. Everyone loves Dr. Evil. Everyone. I was going to say Dr. Phil. That can go either way now. But with Trump. Obviously like 50, it's like 50-50, depending on where I'm doing him. I can still remember, like most of the time when I do corporate, obviously they're cool with it because the CEO brought me in. But I can still remember when I did Conan, we did Comic-Con. The first year I did live on stage with Conan was a bit where I played Captain Make America Great Again. So I was half Captain America, half Trump. And I walked out and you could feel it backstage, just the energy, just the regular energy. And then Conan says, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Make America Great Again. And I walked out and they were booing. Like a comedic boo, but you could feel it. I mean, you could really feel it. And I said, and in that moment, I was like, I'm a pro, take it, and turn it around and give it right back to them, because they said, you hear that, Conan? They're calling me their boo. Isn't that great? You know what I mean? So it was just like such a fun moment, but it's been very rare where someone is like pissed off. But I did the big security show in Denver a couple of years ago, and a woman came up to me pre-show, and because I was with my fake Secret Service walking through the show because I was doing the big main event, and the woman's like, I don't like you. I don't like you. And I was like, well, I think you'll like me after my speech. And because one of the things is like, impersonator, impressionist, no matter who you are, like your personality comes to. If I'm up there for 35 minutes, you're getting a good portion of who I am.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So and I've heard this many times before, but she came back to the booth afterwards. She goes, I like you. I like your Donald Trump. He's very funny. And so I don't purposely, I am just a warm person. I think it comes through in all the impressions. So I may have made Trump more friendlier than he actually is. But I've always gotten a good response because we've had situations where people are like, yeah, we don't know if we want Trump there. It could kind of go the wrong way. And I said, when I'm on the call with my agent and like the production team saying, done this before. And I said, none of the material will be political. And I said, it's going to be about your people, your C-suite people, your CMO, your CFO. I'm roasting them. It's just kind of, we're using this character as a conduit to roast him. I said, I can do this as Austin or Dr. Phil, but the more effective bit is going to be doing it as Trump. And then they get that. And it works. We've never had a situation where anyone's been like, this is an abomination. It's always worked. So.
It's amazing. Yeah. When I saw you do it, I was.
And you can see the people cringe. Yeah. And like that.
It's just.
Yeah.
You got to be open. I think you got to be open-minded to it. And like you said, I'm glad what you said is you didn't make it political. It's just using his voice and his tone.
Yeah.
But relating it to what's going on in front of us, which is just like, oh my.
There's nothing hilarious. Like, your CFO, what a moron. This guy has no idea what he's doing. It's so sad. It's so sad. You know, they love that. You know, when you rip the C-suite at a company, they absolutely love it.
Has there ever been an impersonation that you wanted? Because I know you do Austin, you do, almost said Austin Powers.
Austin Powers, Dr. Phil, Dr. Evil, Guy Fieri. You know, I used to do a lot more, but some of them, I still do a lot of voices, but you know, they're just not applicable nowadays. I
saw recently you did Jay Leno.
Yes, I did
full
Jay Leno.
Costume, that was gold.
Good to see you. Yeah, that took 3 hours to do that chin and makeup application.
Have you ever attempted one or had one you wanted to do that it just wasn't good? Frank Caliendo, who
I think a lot of impressionists look up to, he's absolutely amazing. He was doing that John Madden for years.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, and I would talk to other impressionists and I'm like, what is the way in on that voice? And they're like, okay, no one could crack that voice. And I would have loved, because sports figures are great and they usually live beyond, a pretty decent amount of time. And I just couldn't figure out John Madden. And I talked to like people who specialize in difficult voices. And they're like, I don't know who's doing this. So yeah, every now and then, and I'm playing around with Elon Musk right now because the way he's speaking, so we're going to make mistakes, And so it's funny because Mike Myers is doing it kind of like a little bit of Austin Powers, you know what I mean? Glitch, So it's finding my own way into a voice, because I waited the longest time to do Biden, but come on, man, it's Marcia Malarkey. Oh, no, I'm being serious. Now, come on. Hey, here's the deal, Jack. Like that whole whisper. Oh, that's right. Yeah, sure. It's like finding like where is the voice and what are the things that people are going to most recognize, and it's fun kind of breaking a voice down, and that goes back to my speech therapist because I break down I try to break down every voice by like those 8 points that they had: nose placement, throat placement, vocal production, all those things. And I always call like the last one the secret sauce. And what is that secret sauce? What makes taking all those elements, putting it together, and then the physicality of it, because Austin's very, baby. And Trump is more like the dinosaur hands and that kind of thing, So I always try to find it. And for Dr. Phil, he's another physical guy because he's a big guy. What were you thinking? Okay.
You asked me before we started, like, where did the BambooSZN come from, right?
Yes.
And right now, as I'm hearing this, your story, it literally is that. Because you were planting seeds when you were a kid, 5 years old, going through speech therapy, not knowing it, not seeing the growth happen, but then, boom, the career you started to be in, that speech therapy helped you become great at these voices, at the impressions. That's BambooSZN right there.
It's BambooSZN. And I literally just read this.
You don't see the growth. You know what I mean? You don't even know it's happening underground.
And then bam.
Boom. And that's you. Here he is. John Di Domenico. We'll wrap up here in a second. I want to ask you maybe one or two final questions is, if you had to give yourself advice 18 years old as you are now, what would you tell the 18-year-old?
You know, I think about this a lot because I went to college, but what I should have done is I should have gone to Chicago or Toronto and gotten into Second City, because I love sketch comedy and I love all comedy, and I probably would have sped up the process of, as opposed to going through college for 4 years, just pursuing what I wanted to do, kind of the 10,000 hours thing, but even earlier and getting that knocked out earlier. You know, that's if I'd stayed as a performer. Because now, as an adult, I look back and go, I should have been an attorney. I'd have some more money, you know. So, but everything happens for a reason. But sometimes you see the line a little clearer, you know, and I think that would have been probably more beneficial. I may have not been mature enough, because, you know, one of the things with college is I think it matures you in certain aspects. It buys you 4 years, but in life, 4 years is a long time. Yeah. So, but coming from a family, and everything is, you know, circumstantial. Coming from a family where my dad had a 9th grade education, he always said, get an education, you go to college. This is what you do. You go to kind of very much the American dream kind of thing. Because, and I'm also from the Philadelphia area. Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York, like it is like college and university central. I mean, just in Philly alone, we have the University of Penn, Drexel, LaSalle,
Xavier,
St. Joseph's, Villanova. I mean, so many great schools. So if you're going to be living anywhere and want to go to school, like that was, I ended up at Temple. I started East Stroudsburg in the Poconos, but I ended up at Temple.
Man.
So, you know.
Final question. Oh, God, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say
final question.
6 years.
Any, what's a quote you live by and why?
There's so many quotes, but the thing I've become most kind of attuned to is time. Because I'm 62 now. And it is, don't waste time on the little things that I get pulled into. Focus on the things that are going to get me my keynote, that are going to get me to places where I can help other people. Because I fall into the procrastination of, let me clean my desk. Let me rearrange these books. Let me do this, instead of revising my keynote. And that's one thing I live by is what you're doing right now a real thing, or are you just being busy? And that's what I literally live by. Stop being busy and get to work.
Woo, that's fire.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Making
you.
time, coming on. You shared some great gems, not just your impressions, but your stories. A lot of good motivation, and I didn't expect you to throw on us, and I love it. Like I said, you're not just a comedian, not just an impressionist, not just a writer, actor. You're a speaker. You're a resilience-built man. I loved hearing your story today. Thank you so much, John, for making time today. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'm going to leave you with a word. Do not let yourself stay tied to people and environments for too long. They're tying you down and holding you back from becoming your best self. You got to cut those ties so you could be a wild horse running on the beach, looking sexy and enjoying life. If you continue to stay around the same people, same environments, you're going to get the same results and continue to do the same things. You want different. You need different environments. You need different people around you. 2 words. Keep growing.